I'm Amy the Bunny Lady. This is my partner Elusive, Ellie for short. High five. Good job. And today we have a new partner here with us today. This over here is Teddy Bear. And we are going to talk about how to bond your rabbits so that you can have more than one of these wonderful bunnies in your home. If you are new to my channel, welcome. We give tips and tricks on how to make sure you have a happy and healthy bunny in your home, or more than one happy and healthy bunny in your home. So if you're interested in that kind of content, then go ahead and hit that subscription button and the notification bell next to it so that you never miss any of our weekly videos. This video is only going to be going over one technique for bonding your rabbits, but the reality is there are many different ways to go about the bonding process. There are as many different ways as there are rabbits in the world, basically. So I do plan at this point on having some future videos where I'll go over some other techniques, but really you'll have to be paying attention to your rabbit's body language and their personalities and then your own living circumstances so that you can adjust the technique to work for you. But the one I'm going to go over in this video is, I guess, it's probably the most common technique that's used. So hopefully that will help you get started while you think about bringing a new rabbit into your home. Even if you have a very good understanding of rabbit behavior and body language, bonding rabbits can actually be a pretty complicated process. It's not going to go smoothly because rather than depending on you understanding your rabbit and their body language, it has to be your rabbits that understand each other. Despite what people say, a lot of times the two rabbits really don't speak the same language and they have to learn how to communicate and it can be a process. It's not going to be easy. In fact, I can almost guarantee you that bonding is going to be a stressful process, both for you and for the rabbits involved. It's stressful for you because you're going to be worried like, are your rabbits going to hurt each other? You're purposefully putting your rabbits into unfamiliar situations, possibly even purposefully putting them into stressful situations. So a lot of times just being on the sidelines watching is just as stressful as it is for the rabbits. So I want to make sure you're prepared for those feelings, those emotions that you're going to feel, as well as the process for your rabbits. In most cases, bonding is going to take anywhere from about 2 weeks to 2 months. In very rare cases, it'll take less than that, like rabbits that basically get along right away. And it can also potentially take a lot longer. I've heard of cases where people have bonded their rabbits, they've been working on it for 2 years. So you need to be prepared for a long, drawn-out process. You also really want to make sure that you have a plan for if it never works out. If it's been months, your rabbits are still really aggressive with each other, will you be able to house your rabbits separately? Maybe you have a family member that would be willing to take on the second rabbit if the bonding never works out. If you adopt your rabbit from a shelter, which I definitely recommend, you may have an understanding with the shelter that that if it doesn't go right, you may have to return them to the shelter. Whatever it is, you do want to have a plan, because in most cases, if you give it enough time, bonding will work out. But there are occasions where that might not be true, so you definitely want to be prepared for all the possible scenarios. In order to give you the best chance of success with bonding, there's actually a lot of preparations that you want to do before you even get started. The number one most important thing that I can tell you to do is make sure that all of the rabbits involved have been spayed or neutered. And you want to make sure that you let a month pass after their surgery. This gives them a chance to heal from the incisions from the surgery, and it also gives them a chance to let their hormones die down a little bit so that they're less likely to become aggressive or territorial during the process. You also want to make sure you have 2 separate side-by-side enclosures to start with. So you obviously don't want to put them into the same enclosure right from the beginning because that's likely to lead to a fight. The rabbit whose home it was originally will usually become super territorial and they'll fight the other rabbit, and it's just not likely to turn out well. So you want to make sure you have 2 different setups side by side, or at least in the same room, so that they can see each other, smell each other, but you want to avoid letting them touch each other. Because rabbits can try to bite at each other and attack each other through the bars, So you want to keep that from happening by keeping the pens separate. And since you do want to make sure they get exercise and still want to avoid letting them bite each other, I got these mesh cubes to kind of attach to the outside of the pens. This way my rabbits would be able to kind of go up to each other in the pens, check each other out, but there is no chance that they'll be able to bite each other because the holes in the mesh were too small. I will leave a link to exactly what I got in the description below, but I used little tiny zip ties and zip tied them together, put them up along the edges, the outside of the pens. It gives them a chance to get to know each other or get to understand each other's scent without worry that they'll hurt each other. Once you have these two separate enclosures, you want to swap your rabbits every day so that they can get used to living in the other rabbit's scent. You don't want to swap any of their supplies, just the rabbit, so that they'll have to use each other's food bowl, they'll have to use each other's litter box and their hay trough, and that way they'll get used to living in the other rabbit's scent and feel a little bit less possessive of the objects that they would see as theirs. Most people will advise that you do this for a whole week before you start the formal bonding process, but that depends on how your rabbits are doing together. If they are really wary of each other and like trying to attack each other through the bars, yes, continue to do that for a week, maybe even 2 weeks. But if they're pretty comfortable with each other, then you can start the bonding process a little bit earlier. So just pay attention to your rabbit's behavior towards each other to know whether or not it's a good idea to start a little bit sooner or not. During this time where you're swapping your rabbits, you're also going to want to make sure when you feed them, especially when you feed them their pellets or their leafy greens, you know, the yummier things, you want to make sure that you feed them next to each other. Eating is a very pleasant experience for rabbits. Generally, you're not going to eat when you feel threatened, so having them eat next to each other is something that can help them have positive feelings when the other rabbit is around. So it's something that should help in the long run. As you're getting ready to start the bonding process, you want to make sure that you have a neutral territory available. This is very important. A neutral territory is one that neither rabbit will see as theirs. They won't have any claim to it. Generally, this is going to be an area that is a totally separate room in the house is usually best. Oftentimes the rooms that people will use will be the bathroom or the kitchen, or potentially if you have a living room that's far away from their rabbit room, you could put a pen in the living room. But you do want to make sure you have this kind of neutral space available, because if you don't, rabbits will be territorial. They'll see the other rabbit as an invader, and it's very likely that a fight will ensue. This is especially common with female rabbits. They tend to be a lot more territorial than the male rabbits. It is often harder to bring a second rabbit into a female home because of this, but it is possible. If you don't have any neutral space in your home, like say you live in a small apartment, or just the rabbit has, free roam of the whole house, so where are you going to put them? There are a couple things you can do. See if you can get the help of a friend or family member. See if you can spend 2 weeks at one of their houses or something and bring your rabbits with you, and the whole new house will be a neutral territory. B, you can prepare like a month or two ahead of time and just close off completely one part of the home and clean it very thoroughly. And if your rabbit hasn't been there for a couple months, then they're more likely to see that as a neutral territory, and it should be able to be used for bonding. Otherwise, what you can do is wait till you move, essentially. You can have two rabbits living side by side, or have two different rabbit rooms, and then when you are ready to move to a different apartment, move to a different home, then you can bond your rabbits once you move there. When setting up this neutral area, you also want to make sure that all of the supplies there are ones that your rabbit haven't used before. So you want to get new litter boxes, a new hiding house, new food and water bowls. It's actually even better if you have 2 new of each ones, because rabbits will sometimes get possessive of a litter box more easily than other areas. This will give your rabbits choices, and it should prevent them from feeling like they can't use a hiding house because the other rabbit has claimed that as their territory, or they can't use a litter box because the other rabbit has claimed that. The other thing you can do that can significantly improve the success of your bonding is to go on some dates ahead of time and bring home a rabbit that your own rabbit helps you choose as a potential partner. Sometimes animal shelters will be able to kind of assist you with this. They will allow you to bring your rabbit in, introduce them to a couple other rabbits, and then whichever one your rabbit kind of gets along with best, that's the one that can be their partner. Usually what you're going to get at best is going to be the rabbits ignoring each other. You're not going to really be able to tell if your rabbits are going to love each other right away, if it's going to be a super short bonding process, because they can change a lot once they get into an area that they might see as their territory. But what you can do is figure out which rabbits your rabbit would absolutely hate. So the ones that they definitely will not get along with. So if you bring your rabbit in and they start basically fighting with one of the rabbits right away, you know that's not one you're going to want to bring home, because that will be a really difficult or almost impossible bond. So you want to look for rabbits that your bun is either ignoring or one that they generally get along with. Maybe they're curious about each other. As long as they're not fighting outright, then it usually will work in the long run. The other thing that you want to make sure you're prepared for before you start bonding is you want to make sure you have supplies to break up rabbit fights. Now, we always hope that our rabbits won't fight, but there is that chance. So you want to have thick gloves just in case you need to break them up, a broom or a dustpan or something like that, something that you can physically get in between the rabbits and push them away from each other so that they will not hurt each other. A squirt bottle, so you can squirt water on if one of the rabbits is getting aggressive. You can usually squirt them and they'll stop, they'll have to clean themselves. It can prevent some aggressive behavior from becoming a full-fledged fight if you do that. So a squirt bottle is a good idea to have. And also long pants, boots, whatever you need to protect yourself as well, because they're not necessarily going to differentiate between you and rabbit and you could get bit. During the bonding process, there are behaviors that you're going to want to look out for. There are some behaviors that will let you know the bonding is going well and you can move on to the next step, basically. There are some neutral behaviors that might seem surprising, or maybe you're a little worried about them. They're not dangerous per se, but they might startle you. And then there are actual negative behaviors that you want to watch for and make sure that your rabbits don't have these behaviors and then start hurting each other. So I'm going to start with the negative behaviors. These are what will let you know that the bonding is a little rocky and is what you want to look out for so that you can be ready to separate your rabbits if it becomes a dangerous situation. The first thing you want to look out for is general aggressive behavior. Ears especially are a big indicator of this. So normally if a rabbit is like confident and hopping around, the ears will be, forward, maybe not alert forward, but generally up. Then if they're super relaxed and just kind of chilling out, their ears will usually be like laying down along their back. So for aggressive behavior, you're looking for something that's in the middle. Usually you will physically see their ears move from this confident straight up position to a 45-degree going backwards position. And this is them basically getting ready to lunge or attack. Especially if they are looking at the other rabbit and then their ears start to go back at this 45 position, you want to be ready to intervene. That's a good time to use the squirt bottle and squirt their forehead to distract them from whatever is making them angry at the other rabbit. When they're showing this aggressive behavior, usually their tail also will come up. Their whole butt basically goes up. And also they'll usually raise their chin a little bit, so as if they're ready to go strike forward. The easiest indicator to get is the ears, though. Then you also want to look out for biting and lunging. They'll lunge with their mouth open and try to bite the other rabbit. Usually it ends up that they just get a tuft of fur and they don't actually end up injuring the other rabbit, but you do want to be careful for it if it's something that they do a lot, especially because it can have potential to actually bite the other rabbit and get them and hurt them. The behavior that you want to look out for the most is something that's called a bunny tornado, basically. It is when the two rabbits will start to circle each other, and they'll circle each other into tighter in tighter circles, and they'll be going faster and faster around each other. They'll start to be fur flying, and this can very quickly lead to injury. So it's something that you want to avoid completely. If they even look like they're starting to go into a tornado, get something in between them, get a dustpan or a broom in between them and get them apart from each other, get them separated. Because if your rabbits actually hurt each other, that will set the bonding process back. It makes it a lot harder to actually bond these rabbits. Neutral behaviors in rabbits can sometimes look like negative behaviors. It can be difficult to tell the difference, especially if you're new to this. Some things to look out for that, you want to watch your rabbit to make sure it doesn't escalate, but it's not necessarily a bad thing, is chasing. Rabbits will chase each other as a way to show dominance, essentially. The dominant rabbit will chase the one that is less dominant. But as long as that second rabbit is running away, then you can actually let chases continue. I would say step in and stop them after 20 to 30 seconds if it keeps going, because the longer it goes on, the more likely that the rabbit being chased will, turn back and start attacking. So you don't want to let it go on for too long, but really this is just a dominance ritual where one rabbit is trying to claim dominance over the other rabbit. That's what happens. It's rabbit hierarchy, and that's really what bonding is trying to figure out, who's going to be dominant. But it is okay to let some chasing continue. You just want to make sure it doesn't get aggressive. So definitely watch your rabbits when they chase each other, but don't think that just because there's chasing that's happening that that's a bad thing. Another thing you might see is mounting behaviors. So one rabbit will try to mount the other rabbit. Now, interestingly, with Ellie and Teddy, that didn't happen, not at all, which is kind of unusual. Most of the time you will get rabbits that one will try to mount the other, and maybe they'll try to mount each other. It's not really a sexual thing, it's a dominance thing. So the one mounting the other rabbit, they're trying to claim dominance. So it's not something that you need to stop if you see this behavior. Now, if it's going on for more than like 30 seconds, then yeah, you can get the top bun off of the one that's on the bottom, because that can get frustrating. And you, again, don't want the submissive bun to go and get angry, get frustrated, and then turn on the other rabbit, because that can lead to a fight. So if the mounting goes on for too long, separate them. The other thing you want to do is make sure you separate any reverse mounting. So sometimes rabbits will mount the other rabbit's head instead, and you want to avoid this because the one on the bottom can end up biting the one on the top, and that's not good. So you want to separate that if you see it. Another neutral behavior that you might see that might seem kind of aggressive is nipping. Now, this is when your rabbit, they might nip the other rabbit, whether maybe the other rabbit's annoying them, maybe they want the other rabbit to move because they're in the way. They might even get a tuft of fur, so you might see a little bit of fur around. That's okay, as long as the nipping is not accompanied by that aggressive behavior that I was talking about earlier, then it's okay. That's just how the rabbits are communicating with each other. Sometimes rabbits will nip, sometimes they'll do a nudge to try to nudge the other rabbit out of the way. That kind of thing. It's just them learning how to communicate. Another neutral behavior is actually just rabbits ignoring each other. It might seem like if they're ignoring each other that it's no bad thing. It's a sign that they're not getting closer together. It's a sign that they're not bonding like they should. But just the fact that they are not actively terrified of each other or actively getting aggressive toward each other, just that fact is a sign that this is probably going to work out in the long run. They just need more time to get used to it. You'll also notice an increased amount of marking between the rabbits. This will happen both when they are together and when you have them side by side in their separate pens. So the rabbits will start pooping all over the place. They'll start peeing along the borders of their territory, or what they want to be their territory. And you'll see this, even if your rabbit is litter box trained, you will see this. So be prepared, because you are likely to have to deal with a lot more rabbit pee than you are used to. Now on to positive behaviors. These are the ones that when you see them, you know that the bonding is going well. It's probably, you can probably start to move on to the next phase of the bonding process. The first one is mirroring. So this is when one rabbit basically mirrors what the other rabbit is doing. Think of it similar to, with people, when you start to like each other more, you actually start to talk like them. People will mirror each other's sentence structure and the word choice that they have when they start to like someone. So it's similar to that with rabbits. Like if one rabbit starts to clean themselves and then the other rabbit starts to clean themselves too at the same time, even if they're not right next to each other, then that means that they're starting to like each other. They're starting to see each other as friends. Same thing is like if one rabbit loafs and then one rabbit decides to go into a loaf at the other end of the pen, that's actually a good sign. Another positive sign that you want to look for is rabbits that are laying down when they're in the same area together. They could be laying down next to each other. That is an excellent sign. But even if they're laying down at opposite ends of the pen, opposite ends of the room, then that's still a good sign, because the thing with rabbits that are laying down, so sprawled out on the ground, maybe even flopped over, they can't get up very quickly, which means they're putting a lot of trust into anyone that they're sharing a space with. That means they trust that the other rabbit is not going to just come and attack them at any minute. They're not so wary of the other rabbit, so it's a very positive sign. And then the number one positive behavior that you want to look for between rabbits to know that this is going real well is grooming. You want to see rabbits licking each other. Usually it will be like on their forehead or on their ears. You want to see them both grooming each other by the time the bonding process is over, because that's a good sign that your rabbits are doing well together and your rabbits they like each other, they care about each other. They're giving each other little rabbit kisses. So that is the number one sign that is important to look out for when bonding. This technique is basically the start small technique. What you do is start your rabbits in a very small space, and then you move them to like a medium-sized space, and then move them to a bigger space. And you start small, you start with short periods of time, and then you slowly increase the space and increase the amount of time that they spend together. So with this technique, when you start, you're going to do 10 to 15 minutes of stress bonding, followed by 10 to 15 minutes outside of the stressful thing, still in a small space though. Stress bonding is when you purposefully stress your rabbits out, essentially, in order to get them to comfort each other. The goal is basically to get them to remember that, this other rabbit, we comforted each other when we were scared, and so I can trust this other rabbit. There are a couple ways to do the stress bonding, depending on what you have. The best thing that's often recommended is to bring your rabbits for a short car ride. So put your rabbits into either a box or a carrier with something that opens at the top. You want it to open at the top so that you can separate them if something happens. So when you go for a ride in the car, you do want someone else to be driving so that you can pay attention to the rabbits. If that's not possible, you can put them onto a washing machine. So washing machines, the vibration is usually pretty scary for rabbits, so putting them on top will stress them out a little bit and force them to bond a little bit. Another option is just carrying your rabbits in whatever box or carrier that you have. That in itself can be a stressful situation for rabbits, because the process of walking kind of jostles them up and down a little bit. And carry them around the house, up and down the stairs, something like that, for 10 to 15 minutes. It'll exercise your arms. And that is enough stress bonding, usually, to get your rabbits stressed out enough that they'll be comforting each other. And then for the next 10 to 15 minutes, you can allow them to calm down and get used to being next to each other when they are not in a stressful situation. Usually you'll only do the stress bonding for the first 2 to 3 days, and then you shouldn't have to use it anymore, and you can just go straight to having your rabbits in the smaller space. But the idea will be letting them spend longer and longer together in this smaller space until you're starting to see some positive signs. You'll see your rabbits start to relax next to each other. You'll see your rabbits grooming each other a little bit, would be the hope. Or at the very least not trying to hurt each other. Then that is a good indication that you can move on to the next step. So once you are seeing at least neutral behaviors in this box, then you can move on to step 2, which is going to be something like a bathtub size. You can use an actual bathtub, but you can also set up a 2x4 foot pen, something like that. That can be a slightly bigger space for your rabbit, where they'll actually be able to start moving around and interacting. And again, you are going to start at a very short period of time. So start with the first day, putting them into the bathtub for about 15 minutes, and then it's done and you can bring them back to their separate enclosures. And then the second day, try half an hour, and then an hour, and then 2 hours. And then as long as they're not showing any serious aggressive behavior towards each other, neutral behaviors are okay. You're going to increase the amount of time that they spend in this until you reach probably at least 4 to 5 hours that they can spend together without hurting each other. And then once you also start to see these positive behaviors that I talked about, that's when you will want to move on to step 3, which will be an even bigger area. So you can move into, if you have the whole bathroom that you can use as a neutral space, move from the bathtub into the rest of the bathroom. Or you can set up a pen in the living room for them to use. Just you want it to be a bigger space, probably something around 4 by 4 feet would be a good space, but even bigger is also great. And then you're going to do the same thing in this new area. So you're going to start for short periods of time, start with just about 15 minutes, and then increase the time and increase the time. And then you want to go until they can go 5 to 7 hours in this neutral space without hurting each other, and you want to make sure that you're seeing these positive behaviors. At this point, you do want to make sure you're seeing grooming specifically, because that is the number one indicator that you can get of rabbits basically accepting each other. Once your rabbits are doing well for a long period of time in this neutral space, whether it be a pen or the bathroom or the kitchen or whatever it is, that's when it's time to do some overnights. So what I recommend is taking a whole weekend with your rabbits together, and you'll just stay with them, monitor them for these whole hours, sleep near enough that you can hear them. If you want to sleep like right next to the pen on the floor, that's fine. But as long as you're in hearing distance when you sleep, it should be fine, especially because at this point they should be doing okay. But you'll want to take a weekend, Friday, put them together. If they do well for the first 24 hours, then go do a deep clean of their together living space. And then you'll go Saturday night, still in that pen in the neutral space. Sunday morning, that's when you will put them both together into their full-time together space. But doing it in the morning will give you the whole day to monitor them and make sure that they're doing okay. This can mean you can make sure that there are no territorial behaviors that show up when they're moved in together. You can monitor them and watch them to make sure that they are still doing okay, even though they're in what used to be considered a territorial space, but was definitely not neutral. So that way you have that whole day to watch them and make sure that they're going to be okay together. Now, it is pretty common when you go from one step to the other, so one size to the next size to the next size of space. It is relatively common for them to be some small setbacks. So if they were doing really well in a bathtub size space, and they might then get to a slightly larger space and chase each other a little bit, don't worry too much. If it becomes a serious problem, then yeah, go back a step and stay there for another couple of days before moving on again and seeing how they do. But if it's just for a little bit, say maybe the first 15 minutes, they kind of chase each other, but then they calm down a little bit and they'll relax into the bigger space, then you don't need to take a step back. There are some little things you can do to help the process along a little bit to give you more chance of success or help it go a little bit faster. So the first one that you want to do is just petting your rabbits together. So placing them right next to each other and then petting their heads together and getting them to be calm and getting them to purr a little bit and start to associate each other with those pleasant feelings that they get when they're being pet. That's one thing that you can do. It can really help them make sure that they, have pleasant feelings with each other and are less likely to become aggressive later on. Another thing you can do is to make sure your rabbits have meal times when they're together. Give them their leafy greens together so that they're eating right next to each other. It's best to spread the leafy greens out on the floor so that one of them doesn't become possessive over the bowl. But when it comes time of day for their leafy greens, do it together so that they get those pleasant feelings associated with eating and being with the other rabbit, and hopefully that gets them to like each other a little bit more. Another thing that I have found really helps, at least in the first stages, is when you start bonding them, you want to start them kind of in the middle of the day So the thing is, rabbits are going to be really active in like morning hours and then evening hours, but the middle of the day is for sleeping. They tend to be less active and more just calm and willing to just rest. Then they'll be less likely to be actively aggressive towards each other because all they want to do is go back to sleep. So it tends to be good for introducing rabbits. Now, you do want to bond them in different times of day as you go on. So once you've had success in those first initial sessions, then plan bonding for different times of day so that your rabbits can get used to each other when they're going to be a little bit more active. You may end up finding that you get some more chases during these times of day, but it's better to help them get used to each other and their personalities when they're going to be more active. It's just you want to do that after they've already kind of started to see each other as not being a threat. And the other tip that I have that is really, really important is to make sure you end each session on a high note. So end each session with the rabbits feeling good about each other should theoretically help the next day go a little bit better because they'll remember that they felt good with the other rabbit yesterday. So usually what this will mean is when the time is coming to an end and you're going to separate them, to put them in their separate enclosures, get them next to each other and just pet them for those last 5 minutes. And that'll help them feel good next to each other and hopefully remember that. Another thing you can do is end each session by giving them their leafy greens or giving them some treats. That way, it's another way that they can just think of these sessions in a positive way rather than in a negative way. Once you get to the later stages, when the rabbits are hopefully showing signs, positive signs next to each other, they're maybe starting to groom each other, you don't have to take such an active role in ending it at a positive note, but you do want to make sure you watch them, and if there was just a chase, or maybe one of them just got a little bit annoyed and nipped the other one, try to step in and make sure that you pet them, give them pleasant feelings so that they don't remember the other rabbit as being cranky the next day. Oof, okay, that one was a really long video actually, and I still only scratched the surface with bonding. I really recommend you check out other people who have experience in bonding, see what their process was. I intend to be doing a lot more videos in the future about this to help you along, because I know this can be a scary step to take because bonding is not easy, it's very stressful, it's not necessarily going to go well, and there's always these questions about what do you do, because all rabbits are going to have a different because all rabbits are going to have a different experience when it comes to bonding with each other. So it's never going to be a straightforward process. If you are interested in more information about rabbits and rabbit care and bonding, then please check out my bi-monthly newsletter. I do have tips and tricks about all sorts of things about rabbits, so rabbit health, how to feed rabbits, toys that rabbits might like, and I will occasionally have tips about bonding as well based on my experiences. So definitely check that out. You can find the link in the description below or go to bunnylady.com/newsletter. And thank you so much for watching. I do hope that we will see you next week.